Hello and welcome to the YYC Soccer Podcast. My name is Jason Kmet and my co-host is Scott Strasser. Hey, Scott.
Hi, Jason.
How are you doing tonight, Scott?
I'm doing pretty well. January, which is the coldest, longest, darkest month, is almost over, and I'm excited to get into February. How about you? What are you up to this evening?
Oh, well, not too much, but I've kind of have been noticing the passing of time here, and yeah, like I realized when I was prepping for this episode that by the time we record our next episode next week, Cavs will have already played a match.
Yeah, and it'll be a very important match, arguably the biggest match of their history, or one of the toughest matches of their history. But we're going to talk about that and a lot more. I'm excited to get into it.
If you are a new listener to our podcast, Scott, what is the YYC Soccer Podcast all about?
It's in the name. We talk about soccer in Calgary at the amateur, collegiate, and professional levels. We discuss the teams and the players from Calgary's soccer community, all the way from the grassroots and amateur levels up to the university and professional teams.
This week's topics will include Cavalry FC. They're preparing for their quote-unquote home match versus Pumas on Thursday in Victoria, and they just finished up their wildfire-impacted training camp in California. We'll talk about the Calgary Wild. Their training camp opens next week, and they've been announcing more player signings, including a pair of local siblings. And we have a couple interviews this week. Scott, who are interviews with?
Yeah, we chatted with the Stewart twins, the two local siblings that you referenced, Taegan and Keelyn, who are 17 years old and from Calgary and just signed or it was announced that they had signed for the Calgary Wild, their hometown professional team. So we were at their press conference, weren't we, Jason?
Yeah, it was kind of fun to go in person and check that out. I've never really done one of those press conferences before like that. So, yeah, it's kind of an interesting experience.
So we're going to run the audio from our scrum with the Stewart twins. But just the other day, I also did an interview with Sydney Wathuta, who's a player that we've talked about quite a bit in recent months.
Yeah, the local Calgarian player who was part of that whole University of Vermont Cinderella story. A few days later, he was drafted by the Colorado Rapids. And yeah, you got a chance to talk to him now that he's in Rapids training camp.
Yeah, he's down in Mexico with the Rapids. He has signed a pro contract with their reserves in MLS Next Pro. So we talked about the very early days of his fledgling professional career, but also that Cinderella run to the NCAA championship that the Vermont Catamounts enjoyed and that he got to play a big role in. So excited to share those interviews or that interview and that press conference scrum with our listeners later on in the episode.
Yeah, and we're also going to talk about a whole bunch of Calgary player signings, transfers. It's late January, so there's a lot of movement. So we'll get to all that too. But let's move on and talk about Cavalry FC.
Hi, this is Tobias Waszewski. You're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
All right, Jason. So as you mentioned, Cavalry's preseason training camp in Southern California was affected by the wildfire situation there. It resulted in one of their friendlies being canceled, and the squad was even put under a wildfire alert for a while there in Chula Vista, which is where their training camp headquarters were, just outside of San Diego.
It's a little bit unfortunate that they missed out on that Columbus Crew friendly because they could have had a reunion with Mo Farsi.
Yeah, that was the game that was canceled. They did get to play two other games, however. They took on LAFC and then San Diego State. Jason, there's a really cool photo that circulated on social media after the LAFC game that showed World Cup 2018 winner Olivier Giroud, who's of course now with LAFC after a long career in Europe, in Italy and England and France. He was defending against Charlie Trafford. I really liked that photo.
Yeah, that is pretty cool when you look at it. I noticed that too.
Jason, we know who they played and the days they played, but we actually don't know very much about the games themselves. They weren't broadcasted, and the clubs have actually been pretty quiet about details, even the scores. So we can't really talk about these games because we don't know how they went. But yeah, it was, like I said, pretty cool to see Charlie Trafford getting marked by a former World Cup winner.
So the first match between Cavs and Pumas is on Thursday, and it's in Victoria. And a couple days back, Cavalry released their roster for who they're going to have available for these matches against Pumas. And not a lot of surprises on here, but maybe one or two things that were of note. Scott, what do you think?
Yeah, like you said, there's a lot of continuity from last year, which is to be expected considering that Cavalry won the championship in 2024. The biggest, most noteworthy omission is Lowell Wright. His contract has been terminated after playing 12 games for Cavalry in 2024. You and I liked him, Jason. We talked about what we thought he brought to the team quite a few times, but he never actually played a full 90 minutes, which I didn't actually realize until I read that in a Northern Tribune article.
Seems like he was a player that had, a lot of potential, and I'm not sure, what's going on with his career exactly right now, but, he had some really strong initial years with York, and then he went to Whitecaps 2, and it didn't really seem to go anywhere there, but he's definitely got a lot of tools, but I guess for whatever reasons, it's not going to continue on in Calgary.
It is what it is, right? It does beg the question of what he should do next. I mean, in that Northern Tribune article I referenced, it mentioned that he has recently become a father, which is crazy to me because I think he's still only 20 or 21. I think there's the possibility maybe of going back to York, where it all started for him, considering that York did sell who I would say were their two best players to Forge, being Brian Wright and Mo Babuli. So they'll be in the market for an attack-minded player.
From a Cavalry perspective, one of their other forwards that they had last season, Malcolm Shaw, was not re-signed. So they're really short a couple forwards right now. I guess depth forwards more than anything else. I would think that it's quite possible that they'll be looking to bring someone in to fill that role. And
yeah, the forwards as listed on the Cavalry roster for the CONCACAF Champions Cup series with Pumas include Tobias Warshevsky, who I think we could both agree will probably be Cavalry's main target man, number 9 this season. And then Channon Chanda, who was limited mostly to substitute appearances, is still very young. And then the other two names listed as forwards, kind of interesting because I would consider both of them to be wingers, but Nicholas Veiling, the international signing from Germany, and then Ali Musi. So those are the only 4 listed as forwards in the roster right now. And I would say that only 2 of them are out-and-out strikers.
They still have a couple roster spots available, and I'm sure that for the Pumas matches, it'll probably be okay. But yeah, I think going into the season, they'll have to add someone in there. They also announced that 3 of the players that were on developmental deals last year are going to continue to stay with the team this year, and that was Josh Belbin, Neven Fuster, and James McGlinchey. So I don't expect we're going to be seeing too much of them in the Pumas match.
And apart from them, I think all the rest of the names, very familiar if you've been watching Cavalry. Marco Carducci and Joseph Holiday, the other 2 goalkeepers. Defenders include Michael Harms, Callum Montgomery, Bradley Camden-Theo, Tom Fields, Fraser Aird, and Eric Kobza. And then in the midfield, they have Sergio Camargo, Jesse Daly, Charlie Trafford, Shamit Shom, Diego Gutierrez, Jay Herdman, Mael Henry, Nico Moroniak, and then, as mentioned, Josh Belbin and James McGlinchey.
This match will be on Thursday evening. And any predictions right now, Scott? How do you think it's all going to go down in Victoria?
I wish I could have watched a bit of the friendlies in California to gauge what Cavalry looks like at the moment. There's a lot of, as we've mentioned, continuity. So you would assume that the chemistry from last year is still there. But again, they're taking on a Liga MX side. They're going to be up against it just like they were when they faced Orlando last February. And really, I think Cavalry is going to be hard-pressed to get into the Pumas box, and they're going to spend a lot of time defending, and hopefully they're able to keep it close.
I would say that, it would be pretty optimistic to be predicting victories, for example. But I think that if the team can sort of learn from some of the mistakes they made in the Orlando matches last year and improve their performances in those sorts of ways, like, I know they mentioned you just make, one small mistake and you pay for it. So, we'll see if there's any progression. I think that to me is probably going to be, what you need to be looking for as opposed to say, expecting a result.
Right. No, that's well said.
One last Cavalry-related bit. Want to mention that the Dan Klomp watch, we know he's not coming back to Canada, but he was spotted in Adelaide, Australia. Apparently, he's on trial right now with Adelaide United. They're right near the top of the A-League table. And anyway, it's sounding entirely possible that he'll end up with Adelaide United here. So we'll keep everybody posted. But yeah, even though he's now part of Cavalry's history, I think I'll still be trying to pay attention to see where he lands.
Yeah, and I like that move for him. I was hoping that he would move up rather than laterally, and I do think, A-League is a step up above the CPL in terms of caliber. I would assume, I can't say I've watched much Australian soccer, but you look at, some of the players that have been in that league, you look at the crowd sizes, you look at the overall, I would say, quote unquote, prestige of it. It's a pretty established league, and I don't know if it's at the level of MLS, which is what I was hoping to see Dan Klomp move to, like an MLS side. But if he manages to become a regular for Adelaide United, I think that'd be an awesome story. Another notch in the Cavalry development belt, so to speak.
Hi, this is Taegan Stewart. You're listening to YYC Soccer Podcast.
All right, let's move over and talk about the Calgary Wild. Training camp is imminent. It starts next week. We've seen more signings this week. I think now we're up to a total of, 14 or 15 players. Let's start by talking about the two local players that we were at the press conference for.
Yeah, so this was, what day was it? Monday, you and I went out to the Macron Center where they announced it. They tried to keep it kind of secret, Jason. They said two talented teenage twins from Calgary, and you and I back and forth on Twitter and texting. It was like, this has to be the Stewart sisters. Like, who else could it be? And no surprise, it was Keelyn and Taegan. They showed up in their Foothills apparel to talk to reporters. Quite a few showed up, actually. A lot of media attention from Calgary's legacy media outlets. For that day, they were the youngest signings in the NSL so far. Both of them are just 17 years old. They're from Calgary, but as they'll talk about in the scrum that we're about to share, they have plenty of overseas experience, having gone to Spain and Germany to show their skills. And they also have played for Wales at the U20 level. Oh, and before we do, actually, just to clarify, the other voice is Aaron Toombs from Livewire, which is a news website in Calgary. They kind of broke because of how many reporters there were and media and cameras, they decided to kind of break it up into like 3 or 4 different scrums. So that's who the other guy is in this audio.
Good point. Thanks for including that, Scott. We'll run that now.
You are the youngest members in the league to be signed to Canada's first women's professional soccer team. What's going through your minds right now?
Both very excited. I think that it's a very big accomplishment, and I'm very, very excited. A little nervous, but I'm very excited to just get going. Yeah, same. Over the moon with the avenue to be able to play here in Canada, and yeah.
It seems like a big deal jumping right from going into high school into a professional soccer career.
Yeah, we're still going to continue our education. We're hoping to get in the University of Calgary. Education has been a very big part of our soccer career as well, so we're going to continue that. But it will be a bit of a challenge to manage our school with this program as well, but it's exciting.
Not many players get to sign a pro contract together with their sibling. Can you talk about that and what it means to kind of go through this journey together?
We've played with each other since we were 3, and we've always dreamed of ending up professionally together, and I'm just over the moon it can happen here in our hometown, and it's super exciting, and to have someone, go through the challenges and everything together kind of brings me comfort too, to have someone like my age also on the team and everything like that.
And you talk about it being your hometown team,
yeah.
Obviously brand new startup team. But I know that you guys have often gone overseas to kind of show your skills at the higher level. Can you talk about maybe some of the countries you've gone to, clubs in Europe that you've trained with, And I think you've also repped Wales at the U17 level. Is that correct?
U20.
U20. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. But can you talk about, like, up until now, you've had to leave Calgary to kind of get these opportunities?
Yeah. We've traveled all over the place. From a very young age in 2018, we went over to Barcelona. I think it was 3 times in 18 months. We trained with their La Masia Academy. We trained there with their boys. Then we did a Club World Cup kind of thing, Barca Club World Cup there as well. So we've been gone over to Barcelona multiple times to with boys teams to show our skill. And then most recently we've gone over to Freiburg the last 3 years, I think, 2-3 years, to train with their U17 and U20 team as well in Germany. So yeah.
The Wales opportunity, that's relatively recent. Can you talk a little bit about how that all came up and what the experience was like? Because that was only a few months ago, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, our mum's from Wales, so that's how we qualify for the Welsh. Yeah, I don't really know how it really started, to be honest with you. But I think we got in contact with one of the youth coaches there. And then we actually went over last summer, to kind of train with their academy. And yeah, and then we actually met the coach of the U20 team while we were over there in the summer. And she was quite impressed. So we kept in contact with her over till November, I guess, until the camp. And yeah, and then we went over there and it was an awesome camp. To be honest with you, it was the coaches, the girls, everything it was just an awesome experience. Yeah.
Going back to an answer you gave to a previous question about playing together since you were 3. You've grown up together, obviously playing on the same teams. Can you talk about maybe that twin tuition that I heard you reference in a previous media scrum?
Yeah, I mean, we always seem to, our teammates don't usually like it. That's why we're split in training. But I think that it's something where we've just built the relationship and connection with each other over the last 14 years. And it's just very easy to play with each other since we do play very similarly. And it's just something where it's just natural for us to be able to play together. And I think that because we've been playing for so long, we can read each other's next moves and where we should be moving. And it's just, it's very easy to play with each other.
So you'll be playing with a lot of players older than you, right? Have you done that much before? Have you been playing up in older age groups in your youth career?
Not this old. Yeah, not that. We normally play probably like a year, maybe 2 years older, but never I don't know. I think the youngest besides us is 23, I think, on our team right now. So it's definitely a really big age gap, and we haven't actually played with many people that are that much older than us.
That'll be new. What do you know about your teammates? Obviously, lots of Calgarians, right? Talia White, Grace Storty.
Yeah.
I know you played with probably a couple of the players so far, but what about the players who are coming from other countries? I mean, have you talked to them yet, or have you watched some of their previous games, things like that?
We've watched a couple of the highlights and different things because a lot of them have played internationally on the international teams and different things. So we have watched that. We haven't gotten in contact with them. That's why this week pretty excited that they're coming in to be able to actually meet them in the next couple of weeks. Get out in the field and to be able to play with each other.
Absolutely. What are you most looking forward to when it comes to the NSL, when it comes to the Wild?
To be able to play in front of family and friends, I think. I think it'll be we have family from all over Canada pretty much. I mean, especially on the East Coast, they thought they'd have to go overseas to see us play, but I think being able to do that, be able to just play in front of them, I'm really looking forward to that. And then also just get the training. Really, really excited for it.
Building off one of Scott's questions there, obviously you're going to be playing for a coach that was a head coach in the Premier League, Liddy Bedford there. I mean, what's it like maybe playing for someone who's got that kind of experience and is going to bring maybe that caliber of football here to Calgary?
Yeah, I think she's the main reason why we stayed, actually. We met with her and we were really impressed on what she wants to bring here to Calgary. I think it's going to be great. I think it's going to be great for us because she has a lot of youth experience. So I'm actually really, really excited to actually get started and work with her.
Last one for me is about your playing style, maybe preferred positions, preferred tactics or formations.
We're both very attack-minded players. We really like attacking. And I would say play all over the place. I usually play as a 10, winger, or I have been playing wing back recently. And those are my preferred positions, but I do like getting up in the attack. I don't like sitting back and defending that much. Yeah, same here. I like to play in the midfield more. I can play out wide, but I prefer like midfield. I can play striker as well, more of a false nine. But yeah, like more in the midfield. I can play out wide as well. And yeah, I like attacking and going forward. Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much for yet another interview.
The one other signing that we've heard about this week is for another player from down under, Ali Green.
Yeah, she's born and raised in Sydney, Australia, but she does represent New Zealand internationally. So she's the second New Zealand international to sign for the Wild after Michaela Moore. Ali Green is a fullback, and she has a lot of experience at the pro level around the world. She played for Sydney FC at the start of her career, but then went to Scandinavia and played for Vålerenga in Norway. And it was most recently with a club in Denmark.
With the remaining spots on the roster, Scott, are there any areas that you kind of think or expect that they're going to try and fill specific needs at this point?
I think, have they still only announced one goalkeeper, or am I missing someone? Because there's Sarah Kelty Dealing, but I don't know. Is there another goalkeeper named yet?
No, there isn't. And but I kind of expect it's going to be someone with a bit more pro experience, because Kelty Dealing, is an experienced keeper, but she doesn't have tons of overseas and pro experience. So I know that the Wild has definitely been bringing in a lot of experienced players. So it would just seems to me to make sense that they'll bring in someone with a fair amount of pro experience. Who knows? Maybe it's somebody Lydia Bedford knows from her time in the English pro leagues.
There's another player who we wanted to talk about who hasn't signed for the Wild that you and I have both predicted for a long time would, and that is hometown hero Sarah Kinsner.
Yeah, I just kind of thought that was going to happen by now, but hasn't yet. And yeah, I'm kind of starting to wonder there, but that seemed like such a no-brainer. But who knows?
And then you speculated a couple of players who you think could sign for the Wild potentially. They're not from Calgary, but they are from Alberta.
There are a couple of players from Edmonton, Becca Campbell and Sophie Walsh. Both of them just graduated from NCAA schools last year, and let's just call it a feeling. I think that I've seen some signs online that perhaps these two players may have some connection to the Wild.
I wanted to ask you, Jason, if you knew if Maya Jones is going back to San Diego, because I did see a social media post that was for like a women's soccer specific social media account that suggested that she is still hanging around Calgary.
I saw that post too, and I didn't do any investigating or research on that at all. So, I think she had a pretty decent year last year, but she does have a couple things working against her. One, she does count as an import. And the second thing is the coach who drafted her is no longer there. She's now she was fired during the season, and now she's the coach of the Canadian women's national team. So the coach that brought her in is not around anymore. And you know how it is sometimes. New coaches like to bring in their own players. So those are a couple reasons for me to think that, her future in San Diego might not be quite as secure as maybe she would like it to be. One more thing we want to mention about the NSL before we move on. A player that we've mentioned a fair bit over the history of the podcast has signed with an NSL team, but it is not the Calgary Wild.
Nor is it with Vancouver, which would have been a likely destination for this player. Kaylee Hunter recently signed with AFC Toronto. I believe she's even younger than the Stewart twins, but also 17 years old. So
I think she's actually 2008 and the Stewarts are 2007.
Yes. Yeah. So another, local teenage talent who's kicking off her professional career in the NSL. AFC Toronto, what do you think about that? Because as we know, Kaylee Hunter spent 2024 with the Vancouver Whitecaps.
Well, I saw some stuff online, a couple comments, about it's too bad she didn't end up with the Wild. But of course, I would agree. It would have been a cool story if she would have been here. But actually, I think the whole idea that she never ended up with Vancouver is even probably just about more interesting. It's like, she's been with the Whitecaps organization there for the last, couple years and stuff. And you would think that that would be just an easy transition over. But
I have a couple of highlights from Kaylee Hunter's 2024 here. I want to rattle off because she did have a really, really good 2024 with the Whitecaps. Whitecaps won League One BC, and as you and I talked about in the summer, they also won the League One Interprovincial Championship that Calgary Blizzard took part in. As a result, they qualified for the 2024 CONCACAF Women's Champions Cup. Yeah, she got to then take on the likes of Club America and San Diego Wave and the Portland Thorns, which had Christine Sinclair, already has quite the impressive resume. She could be a name to remember, and she's played for the national U17 team and scored a lot of goals and got a lot of assists, right?
Hello, this is Sydney Wathuta, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
Now we're going to get to our second interview of the episode. And this is an interview with a player that I really wanted to talk to, but it didn't work out. Scott, you got a chance to talk to him.
Yeah, so as mentioned, Sydney Wathuta ties to Calgary, but played his university soccer for the University of Vermont. That team went on a Cinderella run to the NCAA championship this past fall, and in overtime in the championship game against Marshall, scored to win the national championship for Vermont, the team's first national championship, in front of what I believe was around 10,000 plus fans. It looked like a crazy crowd. Since that special moment escalated further, because just a few days later, he was named in the MLS Super Draft by the Colorado Rapids. And Jason, this is a neat little tidbit, but there's another Calgarian who was drafted by the Colorado Rapids in the MLS Super Draft. Do you know who it is?
I do. It's Bradley Camden-Fawo.
Yeah, I actually don't know of any other Calgarian who has been named in the MLS Super Draft. So it's neat that it was the same team that picked both. I think that's a neat bit of trivia. But anyway, I should stop rambling here and we can just run that interview with Sydney Wathuta. I'd like to welcome Sydney Wathuta to the podcast. Sydney is a winger for Colorado Rapids 2, and he also played for the Vermont Catamounts in 2024, winning the national championship. Sydney, you're originally from Calgary, so we're excited to talk to you. Welcome to our podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So I mentioned the team you're with now, and I talked a little bit about your playing for Vermont Catamounts in the NCAA. But can you talk about your Calgary background and maybe some of the clubs and coaches that you played under when you were in Calgary?
Oh, yeah, sure. I was in Calgary probably around U15 age group. I played for the Calgary Blizzards initially under Brendan O'Connell and Kevin Francis. They were my two coaches. Played there for about 2 years. And then within that 2-year period, I was under the RPC program for Whitecaps. It was in Calgary. So I was training there in the morning and then training at night with Blizzards. And then from there, I managed to get a trial at Vancouver Whitecaps. Went there once in 2020. They asked for a retrial again. So I came back, and then COVID hit around that time. So there wasn't much any movement within kind of anyone from the club. So I was in Calgary playing. And then from there, I joined New Frontier, which was Brendan O'Connell's team under the same coaches. And from there, I managed to move to Whitecaps full time.
Okay. And how did the Vermont connection happen? How did you get recruited to go to Vermont?
Actually, the coach, the assistant coach right now is at Vermont, but initially he was at Portland. He came to watch one of my games. He was kind of watching a bunch of players, but he was watching a game I played in, and I did well. And he kind of connected me afterwards saying, hey, he'd love to bring me to Portland and whatever in the spring. But during that period, he moved to Vermont because he got a better offer there, and he's from Vermont, so he recruited me to go there from Vancouver.
It was he who made you settle on that? Because that's a huge move, right? Moving all the way over to the East Coast like that.
Yeah, it partially was. It was mostly him. Yeah, I wanted to go to school and play soccer at the same time, and Vermont was the best option for me. So.
Mm-hmm. And it's clearly worked in your favor. Obviously, Vermont had a Cinderella season in 2024, and you played a big part in that. Can you talk a little bit about the national championship? Because I couldn't help but follow along, because it seemed like every round of the playoffs, you guys had to play a team that was ranked above you, and you had to travel. I think most of your games were on the road, but despite that adversity and those challenges, you guys persevered all the way to the finals. So what about this team made the Catamounts so special in 2024?
I mean, I feel like the team in general, even the past year before, I think we were always good, especially in the tournament. I saw it somewhere we were one of like the top teams with like the most wins in the tournament. So I feel like that says a lot. Like we were a good team in the tournament, and especially in those type of games where it comes down to like little things that'll win you the game. And I feel like, especially like this year, those little things definitely like helped us a lot, and very crucial moments for us where we had to like really dig deep and pull out a clutch performance late on in the games, whether it's a pen or crazy goals. Yeah, we did a lot, but I feel like it's not something that's kind of a surprise from us like individually, because I feel like we've done that. We've been doing that all season. We've done that in the past season. So yeah.
And so some of the teams that you beat en route to the final were Pittsburgh, San Diego, Hofstra, like really big names, and then Marshall in the final. And that game, I saw the winning goal on Twitter. I mean, the video of it was crazy, the reaction and stuff. Can you talk about that moment of clinching a national championship in overtime in front of so many fans?
Yeah, it was obviously a great feeling. I wish I was there live to obviously witness it, but yeah, it was a great feeling to win like that, especially to go down 1-0 and then come back and win the game in OT it's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, definitely a Hollywood inspired season for the Catamounts. And just a few days later, I mean, I think it was the MLS Super Draft, right? And you were named by the Rapids. Were you surprised at being picked in the draft, or had they contacted you prior?
I mean, they did contact me prior. I had a conversation with the coach and everything. Obviously, I was like surprised too that my name got picked, but I had a strong feeling that I would be coming here ideally. But yeah, it was a great feeling. Great feeling. Was.
What most excites you about joining a program like the Rapids? Been in MLS a long time, obviously.
Say that they're a very young team, and that's probably a big thing for me ideally, to be able to transition into and play with players who are like of similar age to me. I won't really feel kind of like out of place, or it won't be hard for me to kind of build a connection with some of the guys, because we're all kind of around the same age and been through kind of like the same experience. So
yeah, and you'll be playing in 2025, it seems like, with Rapids 2 and MLS Next Pro, signed the contract. What has it been like to kind of get the professional career going and to train with the pro side? I believe, are you guys currently in Mexico? Is that where you're doing this from?
yeah, we're in Mexico right now.
Yeah. So how is preseason going?
It's been great. It's been hard. Some days we have 2 sessions a day, and it's been difficult, but I'd say it's great experience. Training here is amazing. Yeah.
I want to ask you, I think you mentioned before we started recording that you typically play as a winger. How would you kind of describe your play, and like what kind of would you say are your strongest attributes as a wide player?
Say my strongest attributes are dribbling and going 1v1. I'm more of a creative player. I try and create a goal or score a goal. Probably those are probably explain my game a bit more. But yeah, and I'm willing to obviously do the defensive work.
Yeah, I couldn't help but notice for Vermont, the number of assists you got, right? Like you were definitely delivering the passes into the box in 2024. So is that something like you enjoy assisting as much as you enjoy scoring? That was something I always felt when I was playing.
I enjoy creating. I like seeing my teammates score, makes me just as happy as seeing me score. So it's one thing, like creating goals.
Beginning your pro career, I mean, what are your expectations for yourself going in MLS Next Pro in a couple of months? What are you kind of hoping to achieve on a personal standpoint, and what do you hope to contribute to Rapids too?
Personal standpoint is probably try and emulate the same form I had in Vermont here. It's goals, creating goals, getting goals, and yeah, it'd probably be my main goal coming here ideally, and obviously to win trophies. And
so you'll have to move to, is it Denver that Rapids are based out of? Yeah. Have you been there yet, or had you been there before being drafted?
I went to Denver a few days early to sort out some paperwork before coming to Mexico. So I've been there for probably a week or so.
I haven't been to Denver, but everything I've heard is that it's like very similar to Calgary. Is that the vibe that you got from the city on first glance?
Yeah, very similar to Calgary. Maybe just a little bit bigger, but yeah, similar city.
Okay, that'll probably help with, I mean, there shouldn't be too much like culture shock, or, you can still see the mountains, same mountains we're looking at. Well, same mountain range. All right. Any kind of last things you want to talk about or mention before we end the conversation? I mean, either about Vermont or about Rapids?
I mean, I'd say for me, transitioning from Vermont to here, I thought it would be kind of a lot harder, or I'd struggle a bit more, but I guess the coaching staff and the players here made me feel very welcome. And I guess day by day, I'm finding it easier to transition, and I don't really miss home as much as I thought I would, which is great for my part.
Does the club usually set you up with housing, or do you have to deal with kind of that on your own, or do you room with teammates? How does that usually go?
No, they set us up with housing. I'm going to room with another teammate, I believe. Yeah, I think that's going to get sorted once I go.
Awesome. Well, Sydney, that's it from me. But thank you so much for coming on the YYC Soccer Podcast, and we're going to be following along this season, and we'll be excited to follow your progress.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, thanks, Scott, for doing that interview, and thanks to Sydney for taking the time to do the interview with us from Mexico.
This is Keelyn Stewart. You are listening to YYC Soccer Podcast.
All right, Jason, last segment of our podcast, as you talked about, it's late January. There's always a lot of transfer news at the end of January every single year, especially when you get to January 30th, January 31st, which is deadline day in Europe. So a lot of European-based Calgary players have been on the move in the last few days and weeks, haven't they?
Yeah, and I think probably the biggest one to mention is Victor Loturi, that he had been transferred from his Scottish team to CF Montreal.
Yeah, Loturi, I don't mind this move. I think if he were to be coming back to the CPL, it would be a little bit disappointing. But MLS is, a strong league, and CF Montreal, he's going to be reunited with Joel Waterman, which I think is pretty cool. And he's he had a good run in Scotland, right? Ross County in the Scottish Premier League. He played 80 plus games, scored a couple of goals. I think this is a good move, and I'm happy that he'll be easier to watch now that he's playing for Montreal.
For whatever reasons, he'd kind of fallen out of favor a bit at Ross County. He hadn't been starting too many games this season. He was most games he would start on the bench and sometimes get into matches, but he wasn't exactly as big a part of that team this year. So signs were kind of pointing towards he might be on the move. And I think CF Montreal probably gets him more on the radar screen of just everybody. Gets him on our radar screen more, gets him on the Canadian men's national team radar screen more. So yeah, it'll be good.
Yeah, you have to factor in that the World Cup being just a year and a half away now. I would definitely guess that played a big part in the decision to come back to Canada.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, another player who is playing over in the UK with the Calgary connection, Bim Peppel. He, as we talked about in our last interview a few weeks ago, had recently moved to Chesterfield, the English Football League 2 club. He's played 3 games for them, but hasn't scored yet.
I've been trying to pay attention to how he's been playing. It seems like there's been some close calls, but you know how it is with strikers. You got to score, but as it's early days, it's only 3 matches. But
now, a former Cavalry player who's over in Europe, Goteh Ntignee, there's been more, I guess you could call it, noise about him leaving FC NSC in France in Ligue 2, second division. Good Northern Tribune article included some quotes from FC NSC sporting director that suggested that he could be on the move or loaned out, as he still is under contract. But Jason, Goteh Ntignee, he's only played 3 games, I believe, for the NSC first team, and he's now been at that club coming on 2 years. So it seems like it hasn't really been the right fit for him.
Yeah, it hasn't worked for whatever reasons. I know when he first got there, when he was transferred, he was injured. But, it seemed to take a while to recover from that. But even then, he just, I don't know, it's never come together for him there for whatever reasons. And in a way, I kind of hope he does end up somewhere else at this point, because it seems like he's kind of spinning his wheels there and not really getting anywhere. So this is an example of a time when maybe it's a new start might reinvigorate things.
Or last male player that we'll mention, who's over in Europe at the moment with a Calgary connection. Just training. I don't think this is a tryout, but Christian Greco-Taylor, former podcast guest, he's over in Germany training with Bundesliga club VfL Bochum's U21s, alongside a few other members of Pacific FC's academy. So this is part of a strategic partnership that Pacific and Bochum signed, I believe, last May. And this is the first time that Pacific has sent some players over. And I believe it's just for a couple of weeks, but it'll be good for Christian, who is still only 19, right? Like, he's still in the very early days of his pro career.
When we interviewed him last year, he hadn't really gotten too many meaningful minutes, but by the end of the year last year, he was playing quite a bit for Pacific, so he seemed to be coming on. So let's hope everything keeps trending in the good direction for him.
Yeah, I think he has a lot of potential, and he could be a really, he could become a regular starter for Pacific in 2025 if he has a good season, I think.
The last topic we were just going to mention is just a Canadian women's U17 team roster was announced today for something called the Mima Cup, which is in Spain. So anyway, there are 2 Calgarians on that team, Ashlyn Walia and Tora Betteridge. So congrats to them, and gives me a reason to check out those scores.
Yeah. Do you know what club they're from, or clubs?
Ashlyn is currently with Foothills, and Tora was with Foothills, but she's moved over to Whitecaps right now.
That's a great opportunity for them.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for listening to the WowIC Soccer Podcast. You can have this podcast downloaded to your device as soon as it becomes available by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or other platforms. Check out our website at wowicsoccer.com, where you can look through our episode archive and find other options to listen, including our YouTube channel. You can also find on our website links to buy Scott's book online. You can leave us a question or comment in the Contact Us section of our website. You can also interact with us on social media, such as Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, where our username is WowIC Soccer 403. Thanks for listening.